And I'm so glad that the two of you are here with us, because it has been like a variety of perspectives, and that's what we want to see. And so this is now time for the folks that I know that have freelanced, or are freelancing, that, we just had Native Report, which that is a whole different, direction, and working, with a production company, or working with a TV station, or working, there are benefits and limitations just like anything else. So to talk about, your journey as a freelancer is helpful to our students, and even we have other panelists still hanging in there that are now in the audience queue. So it's helpful. We just learn from each other. That's what we do.
Awesome.
6 panels already, and they've each had a different format. So
okay, great.
And that's because the artists are different, right? So yeah. And that's good. So each of the 6 panels we've had so far, it's we had multimedia production for Indigenous peoples in the digital age with Gary Farmer and Missy Whiteman and Kurt Kirby, Sir Curtis Kirby III. And then we had the photography with Nadonis Rose Green, and then Paul Trani from Adobe, who brought in that aspect, which was really exciting. And respecting Indigenous storytelling traditions with Pam Belgard, Rihanna Yazzie, and Honda Lewis. And that we went really deep in that one. That was good. And they're all good. And then we had audio production with JG and Chaz Wagner from KBFT. And we ended up talking about music most of the time. And your name came up, Leah, because we understand you're now a member of War Bonnet. All right.
The cat's out of the bag.
And then the Native Report crew came in, and they, did what they do. And that's Ramona Morosas and Michael Lagarde and Rita Aspinwall and Don Mickelson. And then my son Hunter had interned with them, so that's why he was in the lineup there with them. I don't know if he thought that was a good thing that I encouraged that or not, but you know how it is with moms and kids. And so now here we are. We're going to talk about freelance work, and there are challenges and blessings to every journey, and sometimes we feel like it's best to find our voice and to express our perspective through that voice if we can control it ourselves, and that's what freelancing is about, right? And we have the opportunity to then make pitches to different people or different companies, or help. And now with the onset of social media, maybe there's more room for freelancing, more of an opportunity there that maybe didn't exist before. I'm not sure. So wherever we end up talking is great. I'm happy to have you here. With line of what we've been doing is we've just had people introduce themselves to the audience, which includes students and other media makers and friends and family. So you can introduce yourself and just say whatever you want in the introduction, and we'll take it from there. So maybe we'll go with Leah first. How does that sound?
Great. Well, thank you so much for having me here. I'm super stoked to talk about anything and everything with media and amplifying Native voices. So bonjour, I'm Leah Lemm, Lynx Clan, Blacks, Band of Ojibwe member. I live in Grand Rapids, and I'm a community story sharer, completely freelance. I work with several different organizations, contract with several different like nonprofits, radio organizations, and just it's really cool to be working with so many different types of people and projects. But mostly, I'd say 99% is focused on Native voices. So I'm really excited to talk about that today.
Awesome. Miigwech. Khayman?
Bonjour, I'm Khayman Goodsky. I'm from the Voice Fort Band of Chippewa here in Minnesota. I'm Bear Clan, and I currently live in Duluth, Minnesota with my small family. I'm what you call a DIY filmer, so I just pick up any stories that I want to, I write my own films. I direct them, I edit them, I do all the filming myself, and I work with a very small, usually Indigenous actors and artists who live locally, even though I want to kind of expand and travel and make films all over with other Indigenous people. My main focus is bringing on authentic Indigenous stories with other genres other than the ones we've kind of just gotten used to. So yeah, and right now I'm working with the Duluth Superior Film Festival. I'm the programmer for the Indigenous section. So if anyone knows any cool films by Indigenous people, send them my way and I'll be happy to include them. And I'm really happy to be here. So thanks, Liz.
Well, thanks for being here. This is exciting. It's so exciting because there's so much work to be done, right? I've talked about this earlier in an earlier panel, but think of how immersed we are in everybody else's media all the time, right? And Indigenous media, we are like building that immersion. And so there's a lot of work to be done, and having various people telling the stories in different voices and different capacities is so important to us, especially I think in Ojibwe, I'll speak specifically, Ojibwe culture, autonomy is one of our, cherished values, that we each have our own path and we each have our own way, and we respect and honor other people's ways and paths. And so media, we don't want to become homogenized with everybody across, the continental United States. We want to have a distinct voice. And so how do you think in your work that you do, that you have either, encouraged that, or how you've experienced that, or speak somehow to that, uniqueness of voice? Maybe we'll start with Khayman, since we started with Leah first last time.
Yeah, so I highly believe that, again, we're not just like the cookie cutter shape. Each Indigenous person has their own values, their own experiences. We do share a lot of like the same teachings, but I think it's bringing life and just energy to those different ideas is what's really important, and not, not expecting the same things, because after a while that can get a little bit dull, or that cannot even bring the full effect that we want through filmmaking and through other media. And I think it's important that we really start owning our own stories and our own characters and our own life values, I believe. So, and I believe everyone brings something different to the table. I mean, what we in Boys Fort might practice might be different than, a tribe in Wisconsin, but we're still Ojibwe, So it is just the practice of being respectful, but also bringing honor to each one's teachings.
So I'll just echo that a little bit, but also when I started working specifically with Native media and wanting it to be foundationally Native or Ojibwe or me, embracing, my family's history, what we grew up, how we grew up, and the sound of the voice, I realized that we're all on a journey, right? So how I am today isn't the same that I'm going to be tomorrow. It's not the same that I'm going to be the next day. So if I go into talking to folks, I understand that I put the person first before an agenda. If there's going to be some sort of piece about XYZ, and instead of, honing in on that immediately, I feel like there's a lot of relationship building that's done, a lot of kind of sitting down at the virtual dining table, so to speak, and sharing kind of a meal or sharing coffee and just kind of chatting back and forth and feeling where somebody is today or in this moment, and taking those cues and bringing that part to life instead of forcing a story or forcing an agenda onto a program. It's instead a bit more like organic, and coming up from what the person is feeling right in the moment. So I feel like that's a difference in my approach than what I think is usually done.
I'd agree. I've had the privilege, I guess, of seeing Leah work in a couple of different capacities and being, interviewed, and then being interviewed by other people, doing other work. And there's something about that relationship, that beginning interaction that you do very intentionally, and to build that relationship. And then I think, this is a generalization, of course, but Indigenous people generally tend to have that kind of built into our cultural programming, it feels a little bit awkward for us to just come in and be like, okay, I'm going to do this now, let's do it, but we're encouraged, our teachings or our family dynamics or whatever it is, to build a relationship before we get to the meat or the issue that we're hoping for, and it's a different way. I mean, other people I think do it too, but Indigenous people do it in a different way that translates for me as sincerity, as like this authentic desire to get to know me, instead of jumping through the hoops or going through the motions. You can sniff that out right away, like, oh, they're just asking me that because because they have a deadline, or whatever.
Exactly. I don't want to feel like I'm going to somebody as just a source of information, like, you have something I need it, I hit record and now I got it and now I'm on my way. Like, I don't want that to be my process. I want some reciprocity, and a relationship, and it's not perfect. I'll be the first person to say it, but I really do value taking the time to get to know somebody and see what really sparks an interest with somebody, even within that subject matter we might be talking about, and kind of see what somebody wants to geek out about, or what will shine, I guess, in our conversation.
So I think, Khayman, some of the work that I've seen that you have done, you encourage the people you're working with in a different way than other filmmakers that I've seen, and maybe it's just intuition for you, or maybe it's an intentional thing. But how do you bring out the best in the crew or the actors that you work with?
The crew that I work with is I select them because we have a relationship with each other. I only work with people that I feel very close and comfortable with, like, talking to them about my ideas. And I think the main thing it breaks down to is when we're in a scene, I'm always like, well, this is what I want, but I need to know your thoughts and your opinions on your feelings like this, because this isn't just my project. When we're making something together, it becomes ours and it becomes a shared experience. And I don't ever want to be the creator that's like, no, this has to be done like this and like this and like this. I think my thinking has expanded mostly just by sitting and talking with it through my collaborators, and especially my actors. They bring so much to the table, and they make me think of things in new ways that I never would have before. And I really appreciate them, like, taking the time. And I know a lot of, we don't sit down beforehand when we're filming. We do it on location. So it's there, it's fresh. Everything there is, just how we are in the moment. And then we capture that. And I think that's one of the most beautiful things that I could ever receive from them. So.
Which, and being a freelance artist, you have a little bit of space to do that in, I think, right? More so than if you're working on somebody else's schedule. But there's still deadlines and there's still details that need to be managed. How do you do that in the freelance world? Like, how do you manage those things?
So how do you manage the projects as a freelancer? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, like the projects, the people, the details, like all of it, because it really is, like you don't have somebody doing this for you, right?
Yep. And that is an art unto itself, I think. I think it's really important to be self-motivated or self-driving, and the ability to really be in control of your calendar, and some level of project management skills will go a long way, setting the deadline and working backwards, but also understanding that a freelance job can be really cyclical or seasonal, maybe. So for example, right now, March, April, May, June is like a lot of, is our 4 months that lead up to many organizations' end of fiscal year. So that's when like a lot of projects want to be finished. So in doing that and having contracts with nonprofits and other organizations like that, you might find that right now is significantly busy. And then maybe after, July, August, you might have more of a break and feel kind of like, I'm not working, what's wrong? So understanding that work ebbs and flows with the year is a big deal. So if you can get something started and going with projects before it becomes more of an emergency, I think that's great. But I think it takes experience. And I think what students do, in college and in school in general, leading up to finals, leading up to, big projects being done, there's already that sort of training built in, I think. But it really is a skill, gotta say.
Sometimes I say I need a handler, somebody to do all that stuff for me.
Yep. And that is not a bad gig either. At times I've had to hire an assistant, and I think that is such a relief to have somebody on your side that can help you get through those tough months.
Yeah. And Khayman, you're a parent too. How do you balance it all?
A lot of pre-planning, a lot of scheduling. I usually have a huge month calendar, and it's working with people who help me raise my son to, find time to go and film, find time to make art. There have been a couple of projects where I did just pace, put him in one of those baskets or one of those carry-on things, and he slept. So he has been on site with me filming. He, now that he's older, he understands the importance of like when we're filming, we're quiet, but then when it's time to talk creative, sometimes he pitches in these like wild ideas, and I'm like, that's like really cool. I think we're going to try that. So yeah, it is just about scheduling and finding out like the time to do all this stuff, and then working with others to make sure that their schedules align too. I think a lot of planning is very important.
Yeah, and trying to keep the spark alive amidst all the planning that, right? It's all of the things. It's okay. And now during COVID, we've had to add in some special layers of thinking of how we're going to maintain both the creative energy and the organizing, because we have not our usual modes of engagement that I have become like really reliant on, and then suddenly it's gone. I'm like, okay, now what? Had to think outside the box. Leah, you said you had something to share with us. Do you think?
Oh, yeah. So I was thinking I would share a quick trailer for Native Lights. So I wear many hats, but I also host radio and podcast programs that air around Minnesota and are, of course, pushed out to a podcast stream. One is Native Lights. We're in our 3rd season, and it's been really, really fun. And I host the program with my brother, Cole Primo, who is a musician and web producer and does news and is a journalist as well. He's great. And it is a really special program for me to work on because I get to work on it with family, and it strengthened our relationship. And like my dad did the art for it, and we've also had, our other brother on the program, Bryce, and it feels very like familial. And I think that is a strength of it. I've gotten some responses from folks who are like, I really like the podcast because it feels like family. Like I can hear my family, I can relate to it a lot. So I do have a trailer. And what I mean by trailer is that it's an audio trailer, but there is video on it. We are not video specialists. We are audio specialists. So please keep that in mind when I share this. But I just wanted to take a moment and share Native Lights, just so you can kind of hear it. And you'll hear some themes that I had touched on earlier about helping to tell Native stories. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen.
Bonjour, everybody. Welcome to Native Lights,
where Indigenous voices shine. I'm your host, Leah Lemm.
And I'm your other host, Cole Primo.
Native Lights podcast is about community stories. When media covers Indigenous stories, it can be kind of doom and gloomy.
Yeah, and kind of like the title of our podcast, we wanted to shine a light on the good in our communities.
Yeah, it's not turning a blind eye to the issues, but entering into those with those positive attributes that Indigenous people have.
I'm Rob Fairbanks, comedian, and also known as the Leech Lake's favorite son. Not that anybody voted me as the favorite son, I just kind of took it upon myself to take that title. So,
my name is Alicia, and I'm a survivor. You are. Oh, I love you so much. There are times when I'm navigating media, I'm not just there so I can educate the mainstream. I'm there so that my sisters who are listening, they hear my voice.
The reasons you got to be a certain way, they're important, but they're not as important as moving forward.
For brother and sister, right?
That's right.
And we're both Mille Lacs Band of Ojibwe members.
Yes.
We're both musicians. I've been playing guitar and singing for about a couple decades now.
That's right. We've played together a little bit too.
Mm-hmm.
Give me a ticket for an airplane. Ain't got no time to take the fast train.
We're really excited to bring you a very new podcast, and look for us online and iTunes.
Wherever you get your podcasts.
That was terrible.
That was fine.
Native Lights Podcast is a production of Minnesota Native News and Ampers, diverse radio for Minnesota's communities. Native Lights Podcast is made possible by funding from the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund and the citizens of Minnesota.
I feel like we're just a sweet hang.
Nice. That was fun.
Yeah, thank you. So our one of our producers put that together as just sort of an example of what Native Lights is. And I think it's kind of the first little audio piece that plays on our podcast stream, if you go down to like the earliest episode. So yeah, so you could probably see those themes of like entering into a conversation with strength instead of the doom and gloom, like we've heard a few times during this festival.
Yeah, celebrating the positive. And yet, telling the stories from our own perspective, because even if it is a difficult story, as Indigenous people, we're so resilient, and how we've managed to, survive and thrive and to get to this point in, in our stories is by handling the difficult stuff, I think, in ways that other people don't necessarily handle it, like with humor, with acknowledging that there's strength in those difficult times, and that we find that strength, when we are blessed to be able to find that strength in those difficult times, that becomes, blossoms into something to move forward, to share. And then our connection to community, I think, throughout it all, because we experience these things together, right? Mm-hmm. And we can kind of, there are some horrible stories, right, that we could all pull up, but even through that, we're like teasing each other and, trying to encourage each other to, to survive, to stay with us, to continue to carry the torch, or to, carry the stories to the next time. And and so that podcast, that little right there, I think it's cool that producer put it together, because I bet if you would have put it together yourself, it would have had a different direction or a different feel. But that producer saw the magic between your brother and yourself, and how to kind of make it playful like that.
Yeah. Like, I wouldn't have put the random singing that we were doing, like we didn't know it was being recorded. But yeah, and just to wrap up about Native Lights, we made sure to talk to community members or folks that we knew, and some family members. That was a really big part of this. Before, we knew we wanted to do a podcast, and it was one of those things where, we kind of started putting our heads together and just sort of started talking about what we wanted. And then I was like, wait a second, why don't we got to take some time and talk to people, put out our tobacco, do the things we need to do to make sure we get it started off in the right way. And we got some really good input, like focus on what we want to see more of in the world. So we do, like you said, talk about the tough topics, but when we focus on resiliency or resilience, we believe that grows, because what we focus on grows. When you talk nicely to a plant, it grows better. So that's what we focus on. So that's Native Lights.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And the last time we met in person, which was we had our Thunder Film Festival then in 2019. Khayman, we had shared a piece of Khayman's in that film festival, and I've seen on social media, Khayman, that you're doing, you're working on other pieces, of course, since then. In the work that you're doing, I think you have a similar, a thread through the work that you're doing in focusing on resilience, even in the difficult stories. Do you want to talk a little bit about the work you're doing now?
Are you talking about my personal films, or the ones that I'm kind of doing as the program manager for the Duluth Superior Film Festival?
Hi, you could talk about your personal stuff, and then maybe go into the Duluth Superior Film Festival.
Okay, yeah. All my personal films have come from either visions or dreams, or I just get struck by a moment of inspiration, but I'm always very careful with those, that I don't want to I always go for elder guidance, and I always go through a lot of prayer and a lot of thought before I even jot it down. And I think the main thing about my characters is that I want them to be examples of strong Indigenous people who have gone through things, but who haven't lost, their soul, their heart, even sometimes their humors. One of my favorite films is this woman. She's stuck wandering through dreams of a being she doesn't want to be associated with. And she's just rolling her eyes and just being like, no, I don't want anything to do with this, which is a lot of people, when they watch that film, they're like, that's so realistic, but so funny. And I was like, well, thank you. I want these characters to be, breathable. Like, you would meet them and have coffee with them, and you would just recognize them as another human being. And so I think that's very important. I'm very, I appreciate the films where terrible things have happened to characters, and then you can kind of see that they're a little shell-shocked, but I believe there are more stories out there that are waiting to be told about resiliency and like the true strength of Indigenous people. And so working for the Duluth Superior Film Festival, that's kind of what I want to highlight, is the strength we have in our souls, and the strength that we carry from our ancestors. And so that's really what I want to see in Indigenous media, is more of that, and more of also, we're not just the stoic like stereotype of the Indigenous person. We do carry that humor. We do carry some moments where it's just too heartbreaking, where you just have to make a joke, and I think that's a lot different coming from a Western society viewpoint, where they're like, you use humor to deflect, and it's like, well, at that point, what can you do, So that's really what I'm hoping to kind of bring to the table. So thank you.
Yeah, and I think you hit it right. This was said earlier too. The way that Indigenous storytellers tell our stories isn't about the big crisis or the big conflict. It's about all of this story that happens, and there might be a conflict in there, but it's really more about the story. I think it was Rihanna who mentioned it earlier about that. There's a play that's called the Red Sisters that went around, I think like in the 90s maybe. And the big conflict for them was, were they going to make it to the bingo game, And along the way, all of this really, funny, deep, issues that we live as Indigenous people came up, in the conversation they were having on their way to the bingo game. And yeah, it's a different way. We don't have this formulaic fits within 28 minutes or, whatever, where it's introduction, introduce the conflict, see some violence, and then, wrap it up at the end with the happy ending, right? Like that isn't our life. I don't know really whose life it is, but it definitely is not how we tell stories in the Indigenous media. So yeah, that it's all how we are in a position as Indigenous storytellers, and we are doing it to change the narrative, to change the direction, not only for our own media making, our own audience, if you will, but for everybody. And now is the time, really, right? There is no better time for this to happen. And so to have people in the position of doing it, and to share like pieces of wisdom or whatever is really helpful for those up and coming media makers, which I don't know. I mean, like Gary Farm, he's been doing this for, I think he said 50 years, or I don't know how long he's been in media, but sorry, Gary. But it's, like we've had those pioneers, I don't know how to use that word, but those ones that have gone, forth. But now we're starting to get a pool of people doing the work and networking together to strengthen the storytelling in the media. So who are some people that have inspired you? Well, I think that was a lip point to Khayman there. What was the eyebrows?
Oh, the eyebrows, eh? I get a lot of inspiration from my grandfather, Cedric Littlewolf. He was a boxer up on the Iron Range and faced a lot of racism, especially in like the 50s and 60s. But he kept going, and he could have been to the Olympics. And I think that in itself is a story that hasn't been, it's one of those stories that have been, told through our families, but not found in history books. And I think that's just really inspiring, how he was like, yeah, I went and did that. And, he's very chalant about it. But to me, that's very powerful. And I get a lot of inspiration from my mother, I know. But it's just a familial bonds that I have. And then I get inspiration from other artists and seeing how, you know, they turn their art into something so beautiful and like just so awe-inspiring. And like Leah, just watching you talk with your brother and just do like a song, you know, it's very natural to you, but to me that feels like home singing through both of you, and you just bring that out. And any artist who does that, I'm like, wow, like you inspire me. How do I do the same for others who want to start creating stories? And for others who don't even know that we have the option, you know, to create stories, just being out there, just doing your art, you know, I think that's very inspiring. Yeah.
Yeah, Chimigoich Khayman, I think that's so accurate. And for me, my dad is a big inspiration. I know he would always kind of grumble around a little bit about, you know, not hearing Native voices on the radio, not feeling like there was representation. And so, you know, it kind of got the gears working in my head long ago. And I thought he had so many good points about, you know, why would I listen to radio if I don't if it's not for me, and with people who sound like me. And I kept that in mind for a long time. And then I gotta say, I used to work with Rihanna at New Native Theater, and I thought she was a big inspiration too for talking about Native storytelling, and that authentic way of going about it. So I have to give her some big props. And what Khayman said too about other artists, I have to say music, I feel is such a great way to be inspired, because I view creating these podcasts or any radio piece that I do or anything like that as its own composition, and how there's like a build, you know, even just like, it doesn't have to be super obvious, but you know, there's just this like wonderful nuance that can go throughout a piece. Like you don't want to go to the exciting stuff like right away and then have the rest be like the build up. You know what I mean? So I feel like there's this lovely like composition when it comes to making audio pieces that I'm inspired. I get inspired by music and musicians a lot. So those are my influences and inspiration.
Yeah, we were reminded that we were going to talk about the Duluth Superior Film Festival. Jeremy's like, when is that festival? It's coming up shortly, isn't it?
Yeah, so beginning in April, we'll be having a session once a month. We'll be playing Indigenous films, and then we'll be having a panel with artists and other people to talk about the film. But the actual festival, we moved it to August. So we are still accepting submissions all the way up until then. So I'm very excited. We have a really good team. We have a very good like flow going on, and mostly artists who have already early bird submissions. They're very eager. Most of what they've submitted is very good. So it'll be a good time.
It's exciting because, you know, the having the ability to have a voice in media, you know, is relatively new for Indigenous peoples, and be in control of that voice. And so, you know, we have yet to kind of peak, right? We're still kind of building. And so to me, watching any kind of field develop, like this is such an exciting time, like to watch it build and build and build. And we know that there is such a depth I mean, there's so much, such fertile ground in the stories that, you know, we've only started with the surface, right? And so, you know, I'm really like looking forward to how this unfolds, you know, in the next few years. Especially I'm thinking about in like the Duluth area, because, you know, there have been some legislation as well as some organizations that are really looking to, you know, support media makers, freelance makers. I mean, we were just talking with WDSE. They're looking for freelance stories, you know, like, and as well as, you know, other established organizations that are looking, and they have yet to really, you know, fulfill their indigenous content. That, I mean, it seems like perfect timing really to me, you know, for indigenous folks to get in there and to be able to you know, really have our voices be heard, and then to have like Netflix or I'm trying to think, you know, Amazon or like any of the distribution that maybe has seemed out of reach for us. I know they're right there. They're going to be knocking on people's doors if they haven't already, and that's exciting times. Oh, I know what I was going to say. So how do you find the resources, whether it is energy or whether it is you know, actual like items or equipment or props, or like, you know, how do you manage all of that? Because those are things that we need as well, right?
So kind of like equipment and those related things to make stuff. So luckily for me, in audio, there's not a huge barrier to entry. I mean, things can be pretty expensive, but what I really love about podcasting, in particular, I work, you know, in different settings with audio and radio, and more high quality stuff. But with podcasting, it can be pretty simple. So, you know, having like a USB mic, have one here, and maybe like a stereo recorder, and the ability to edit on your computer with a software, and then good headphones. I'm not using them now, but like good over-ear headphones is a really good start to, you know, getting out there and recording stuff. You can record yourself, you know, onto your computer. You can go out into the world and, you know, record some sounds, record others. And there's such a range of prices with things. You can get like the high quality, like public radio standard equipment, or you can just kind of do the best you can. And I've found that whatever works best and whatever provides the least amount of friction or stopping to actually do the story is the best equipment. So whatever that takes. And I would say it's less than $1,000, I want to say, for everything minus a computer. But I think there are grants out there. I know I did, you know, depending on, you know, where you live and stuff like that. I was a big beneficiary of the Tuahe Foundation. I got a grant to study documentary making at the Duke Center for Documentary Studies, like some of their like continuing education classes. So there are, you know, resources out there that can help too. And, you know, a matter of like looking around. But yeah, if you keep those prices low, I think, you know, you can go pretty far, at least with like audio.
I'm going to be honest. My first camera was given to me by a friend's uncle, and it was just a little Sony camera. And I used that camera like during my very, very early ages of filmmaking. And from there, I was just, I went on eBay and I went on a lot of Craigslist, and a lot of people, they'll take up photography. They'll think, you know, it really wasn't for me. And then they want to sell their equipment. And then I kind of just swoop in and I'm like, oh, you know what? I need a mic stand, or, you know, I need this equipment. But most of our things that we've made, we used the wheelchair a long time for a dolly to keep it steady when we're moving the cameras. We try to keep our budget for equipment, you know, because it can add up. It can be very expensive, and not everyone has the resources or the time to go out and get this equipment, and it's not available for everyone, which is a very sad thing, because I think so many storytellers are held back by the lack of equipment, or they think, I don't have the best equipment, so I'm not even going to try. And I think that's what kind of held me back for a long time, until I was like, no, I have this camera, I have the people, I have a story, I have this drive to make this happen now. And sometimes, you know, it won't be the best, but you just got to get out there and you got to do it. And there are grants, you know, there are plenty of grants who are helping, you know, up and coming artists, and especially if you're focused on bringing like Indigenous authentic stories to life and learning and how to, you know, expand our knowledge with other people, they will most likely like give you grant money, and that can carry someone for a very long time. So miigwech to all those grants out there. Yeah.
So when you get started, that's not the end of your equipment, because then once you get rolling, you know, maybe your first project's a little more rugged than, you know, your next project, but, you know, it's like a process, an iterative, expanding process. So you just like get started. And I think that's kind of one of my biggest things for the whole success as a freelancer, is to get started. Start where you are, you know, have your, maybe it's just one little microphone, or even just the microphone on your laptop, or, you know what, voice recorder on your phone. You know, anywhere, any way that you can start, I think is solid. And then as you learn and grow, you can expand your equipment.
Yeah, thanks both of you for that. I know there are a lot of people that feel like they are limited by the resources that they have, but when you start to ask people or look around, there are plenty of resources. Just they might not be the best, but they will work. I remember the first thing, well, now I'm going to date myself. My first recording that I did was on a 4-track cassette. and that was like right before digital was available, you know, on a consumer level. So, you know, we had CD players, but, you know, there's no way I knew how to like do that. But I had this 4-track, and so we recorded it in my living room. But yeah, and it is just about like a good story or a good song. And you hear all kinds of stories where people, like famous people, you know, like they recorded it on the, you know, the whatever. I can't think of any of those stories right now either, but you know what I'm talking about, where it's like crap, they had crap, and then they were able to really produce this amazing piece. So it is about the artist. It is about the person who is doing the work, and starting where you're at, for sure, because then the opportunities start to come. It's true. Like once you start doing the work, then, you know, whoever it is or however it is you believe that it happens. For me, you know, it's like the Gje starts to put the pieces in front of me as soon as I voice it. So now I'm really careful about what I voice, because, you know, the work begins, right? And whether you're ready or not. And so we, you know, recognize those steps. We do the things that need to be done. And that's what you're doing. You know, you're finding the place to share your voice, to share your stories, to help other people share their stories. And it's so important. And I'm so grateful that you came here tonight to have this conversation with me. I'm always empowered by the work that both of you are doing, and grateful that you're doing, you know, with authentic voice. You're not, you know, trying to do it for other people necessarily. You know, this is authenticity that we're seeing, and that's so important. I don't know why I keep getting blinging. Do you hear the blings? Sorry. So maybe we have like some ending thoughts we want to wrap up with. I know both of you have said inspiring things already, but maybe if we're speaking to the people in our audience that have yet to begin, like, you know, what 3 things that they need to know?
3 things. Okay, I'll make them up as I go along. How about that? Let's see. I would say, I want to say networking. Now, that's not like the best word on the planet, but, you know, voicing your wishes will help with meeting new people. I am the first person to admit how shy I am. I've been shy since day one, but have found a lot of like ability to communicate better when I'm doing the work that I'm passionate about. So networking is great. Please feel free to contact me. This work is expanding, and we are most of the work that I do is with Minnesota Native News, with special reporting, with the podcast, with newscast. If you're interested in working in audio in some way, please let me know, so that I'm your first network after my suggestion to network. So feel free to email me or like look me up wherever. Second is follow your curiosity. You know, each person has their own thing, right? Each person is unique. You can follow your instinct. We're blessed with an instinct. Don't feel like you need to do the cool thing over here or that cool thing over there, because somebody else might be, that's their thing. But, you know, really follow what your heart, what your gut is telling you. And third, so I've gone through, I don't know how many degrees I have, honestly, but it doesn't matter, because we are all storytellers and we all have something to share. So I want to say, if you don't feel like you're ready, don't worry about it. Just kind of get started and understand that you have a voice and it is important and valued, and just kind of go for it. That's it.
Yeah, I'll go off your last point. I think the first thing you need to do is to believe in yourself. Because once you start to believe in yourself, you kind of give yourself a power, and whether you like it or not, you attract people with your power. And so I think once I started filmmaking and I started believing in the things I could create, I started gathering other people who wanted to create the same things. And it seemed like coincidence, but I believe it was fate, it was destiny. It was the thread that connects us. And so the second thing I believe you should have is the ability to adapt, to expand. When you're making things, the way you view things will be challenged, and you have to accept that not everyone's going to believe the same things you are, or they're not going to see the same thing. And sometimes in order to make a better piece of art, you have to go with that, and you have to really, you can't stay the same person and continue to make good art, I believe. You're constantly changing, and you have to go with that change. And I know change is scary for a lot of people. Sometimes when I write a project, I'll leave it alone for a year and I'll come back to it and I'm like, what was I going through, that I needed to write this, or, and then it's difficult sometimes stepping back into that person, because I'm no longer that person that I was, a year ago. And I think the third thing is to really never give up. You have a story to tell. You're here for a reason, and you may not know it, but your story could be something that like causes a change in another person. You know, it's and you may never even see that, you know. I've had people come up to me and be like, wow, your film was like so interesting and crazy that I quit my job because the character did, and I went and pursued my art because that character did, and it was like the thing that pushed me to do the things that I love. And I know like we won't always hear that as artists, and we'll think of our art and be like, why do I do this? Like, why do I put myself through this? What's the point? And the point is, you know, make something good, make the world beautiful, inspire others, and just do the best you can.
Wow. Yes. That was that distilled it right down. I wasn't so sure about, should I push him for 3 points, but I'm glad I did. Thank you so much. Both of you, thank you for being here with us. This has been, like I said, it's been better than a dream today. The contact in the chat, thanks for that, Leah, or your WordPress. And that chat has been going all day. I think you can save the chat and you'll get information that other people have put in there as well. Yeah, so let's keep making media.
Miigwech, Liz, and nice to meet you, Khayman.
Yeah, Miigwech, Liz. It was great to like see your podcast and hear your point of view. And Liz, I respect both of you as collaborators and just creators. So this was an honor to be here to talk with you both. Thank you.
Oh, miigwech, Gagin. Yep. All right.
Miigwech, bye.
Oh.